Another day, another story. In the 11th century, the kingdom of Albion was ruled by a just and honorable king named Edward. Edward had inherited the throne from his father, who had been a cruel and despotic ruler. But Edward was determined to be different. He believed that a king's duty was to serve his people, not to lord over them. Edward was a young man, but he was wise beyond his years. He had been educated by the best scholars in the land, and he had a deep understanding of history, philosophy, and politics. He was also a devout Christian, and he believed that his duty as king was to promote the faith and to defend the church against its enemies. One day, a messenger arrived at Edward's court with news of a rebellion in the north. A group of barons had risen up against the king, claiming that he was a weak ruler and that they could do a better job. Edward was deeply troubled by this news, but he was determined to handle the situation with wisdom and grace. He summoned his advisors and asked for their counsel. They told him that he should raise an army and crush the rebellion by force. But Edward was reluctant to shed blood unnecessarily. He knew that many of the rebels were his own subjects, and he did not want to turn them into enemies. Instead, Edward decided to travel north himself, to meet with the rebel leaders and hear their grievances. He knew that this would be a risky move, but he believed that it was the only way to bring peace to his kingdom. Edward set out on his journey with a small retinue of knights and advisors. They traveled for many days, through forests and over hills, until they reached the rebel stronghold. The rebel leaders were surprised to see the king in their midst, and they were unsure how to react. But Edward was calm and friendly, and he soon won their trust. He listened carefully to their complaints, and he promised to address them in a fair and just manner. He also offered them a pardon, if they would lay down their arms and swear loyalty to the crown. The rebel leaders were hesitant at first, but they could see that the king was sincere. They agreed to his terms, and they surrendered their weapons. Edward then returned to his own castle, accompanied by the rebel leaders, as a sign of his goodwill. When they arrived at the castle, Edward held a grand feast in honor of his guests. He sat with them at the high table, and they shared stories and jokes over platters of roast beef and ale. It was a joyful and festive occasion, and it seemed as though the kingdom was at peace once again. But Edward knew that his work was not yet done. He spent many long hours in his study, poring over books and letters, and working out the details of his plan to address the grievances of the rebel barons. He consulted with his advisors and bishops, and he prayed for guidance from God. In the end, Edward came up with a plan that was fair and just for all. He granted the rebels some of their demands, but he also made sure to maintain the power of the crown. He reorganized the tax system, so that it was more equitable for all, and he instituted a system of justice that was impartial and fair. The rebel barons were pleased with the outcome, and they became some of the king's most loyal supporters. They praised his wisdom and fairness, and they swore to serve him faithfully for the rest of their lives. And so, Edward became known as a king who ruled with justice and compassion. He was loved and respected by his people, and his kingdom prospered under his wise leadership. He had shown that a king could be both strong and just, and that the true mark of a ruler was not in. Thanks for watching.